Okay, welcome to the Band of Brothers podcast. I'm here with Kegan M. How you doing, Kegan?
Good.
Good. Thanks for, I just told you before we started, thanks for being willing to come on and share your story, experience, strength, and hope with whoever's listening. Could be somebody with 4 days, could be somebody with 4 years or 40 years, but we appreciate your willingness to tell your story.
Of course.
Well, let's start at the beginning. Like how old were you the first time you ever used anything mind altering? Do you remember?
Well, on purpose, I would say I was probably 13, and I had stolen some money from my stepbrother and given it to someone I knew was in that industry, and just told him, "Give me as much weed as you can get me." And a few weeks later, I got a bag of seeds and stems that was terrible. And funny story, my dad was married to my second stepmom at the time, and they had gone to Mexico and brought back a pipe that was about this big, and it was a monkey, and you put the weed in the top of his head and smoked through that. And I stole it out of their room and smoked it in my room by myself, blew it out the window. Nothing happened. It was, some people say the first time it doesn't work. I don't know if it was that or if it was just such terrible weed that it wouldn't have done anything anyways. But that was the first time I tried to do something to alter my mind. And from there, it just kind of kind of snowballed into, weekends with friends and partying. And
Well, tell me about the first time you felt it.
the first time I felt it was my parents, my dad and stepmom would go out of town quite often, and we were probably 14, 15, no driver's license. And I knew where they hid the car keys. So we took the Suburban, and there was 4 of us driving into town. And at that point I was still kind of not really sure it was what I wanted to do. And we were driving into town. I was driving, and we had this big peace pipe. It looked like an Indian peace pipe. And we called it Chief Smoke Some. And I took a huge rip, and right as I was blowing out, a cop passed us going the other way. And I had my brights on, and I panicked. And we were just about into town when
So you don't have a license. You're like 14, 15. Okay.
Yeah. I think maybe one of us had a permit at the time, but none of us had a license. And it hit me right as we got about a mile closer to town at the stoplight. And, I was panicked because I was thinking, we're going to jail for sure. I don't have a license. It smells in the car. And luckily, the vehicle's brights weren't really that bright. So no one was worried about us, and we continued on. And I don't think that was really when my addiction got its hooks in me at that point.
What was the feeling like, though? Like
panic, mostly just because of
a little paranoia?
Yeah, definitely. It wasn't like, oh, this is the answer, or this is what I've always been looking for. It was like, maybe, this is not what I want. So I think I fought that for a long time. And then when I was 16, I started having back pain. And because I grew fast, I'm 6'6", so I was 6'3", 6'4" at this time, growing faster than.
So where did you grow up?
In Burley.
Burley, Idaho. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And so I went to the chiropractor, and they give you well, you're growing too fast. And turned out they thought it was a dislocated hip. And so I kept getting treatment for that. Well, at this point, my dad had split with the stepmom I had before, and we didn't get along. She was abusive, and as what I look back now and see, it was kind of a way of her trying to make up for that. She started writing prescriptions for me.
So she was a doc or a nurse or what?
She was a nurse, and I won't get into how we got away with it.
Yeah.
But essentially, I was getting enough for about a week and taking them in 2 days tops. And so that was when that was the life-changing event. The first time, so it was Vicodin, Norco, whatever. And it was that's what I had been looking for. That's the feeling that I wanted. That was the solution, I thought. And so that turned into, I could only get a week's at a time, so I'd take them all pretty quick and then go through a day or two of withdrawals, wait for the next refill. And that went on for a while. It was, I hid it from everyone. Nobody knew. It was my dark little secret. And
what do you think? Like, were there any feelings you were medicating, or did you have anxiety, depression growing up? Was there?
Not anxiety or depression. It was, that's a whole other podcast, but we can get into that a little bit. I grew up, my story, actually, when I tell my story, it starts before I was even born. My father lost his mom when he was 18. And it changed the trajectory of his life, which in turn is why I'm here, because he had his mission papers turned in. He was going on a mission. His mom.
LDS mission.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And his mom passed, and he walked out of that hospital and said, "There's no God." Withdrew his papers, and it changed the route. He started partying, and when he was 24, I think he met my mom about a year or two prior, and had me. And then when I was 2, my mom left, and her reasoning for leaving me was to save my dad's life, that I was the one thing that could keep him alive. And going through recovery, I've done a lot of digging, because I spent most of my life, putting my father on a pedestal, because it was always me and him against the world. And looking back now, I see that he spent most of my childhood trying to find that love that he couldn't get from his mom because she was gone. So he put women before me. He remarried twice. Both were physically, mentally, emotionally abusive. And so I think I used to feel that abandonment that I felt from my mom leaving, and my dad not necessarily listening to, when I would tell him these things were happening, nothing would ever happen. He would fight with them, and then everything would go back to normal. As normal as it could.
So did you see your mom a lot growing up, or no?
So when I was younger, she tried, and it was a lot of brainwashing on my stepmother, and my dad was a part of it. It was, oh, she's just showing up when it's convenient for her, and she just shows up with presents and tries to be nice. And looking back, it was my mom's way of trying to be involved. But I think she had to face the fact that she chose to leave, and it was hard for her, to look at that situation and say, oh, I can just come and go as I please. And that doesn't work. You either have to be a parent or, stay out of it, I guess, in a way, because most of the time when she came around, it caused a lot of drama for me, especially. Just getting phone calls and letters from her ignited my stepmother, and it caused a lot of hell for me. I remember finding boxes of toys she had mailed to me that my stepmom would hide. Wow. It was psychological warfare to no end.
Yeah.
So dealing with that, and her coming and going was hard. And like I said, my mom or my dad trying to fill that void that was left by his mom. So when I first really started getting heavy into pills, I felt like none of that, it didn't hurt anymore. And that was huge for me. You know, I was a completely different person on them than when I was off them. I mean, yeah, it changed my life. So I thought for the better. And I can remember.
Did you play sports in high school?
Yes. I played.
You're 6'6" in a small town. You're probably the center.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, yeah, that was, you know, I was under the influence most games. Just I genuinely had back pain, but there was a point where that wasn't what I was using it for. And I remember, so I used my stepmom to no end, even after my dad was gone away from her, because she was, you know, my supply. And she had her own son that had his medical issues, and they prescribed him Percocet. And she couldn't give me any more of what I was used to. And she's like, well, try these. And that was, I can remember the first time I was actually watching Chappelle's Show, which was a skit show back in the early 2000s. Not to age myself that much, but I can remember sitting in a buddy's house, 1 a.m., high as could be, watching that show, and I was like, this is how life is supposed to feel. This is where I want to be all the time. And from there, it was, you know, they're expensive. And once I graduated, I went to college in Twin to CSI, and pills kind of, if they were there, I took them, but I didn't necessarily seek them out or, you know, desire them all the time, because, you know, of course, drinking and smoking weed, I mean, a lot of that was going on, you know, partying, and alcohol was never like, I didn't really enjoy it because I didn't like the way, you know, you have to pee every 5 minutes and then the next day doesn't feel that great. You know, I was more of a, I want to take my pills.
You want a cleaner high.
Exactly. Yeah. I liked that more. And so that kind of went on. I mean, I was selling weed, smoking weed.
Let me back up. So did you grow up LDS or any religion, or?
Nope. I was given the option to, you know, go if I wanted to. So when I was 16, when my dad and stepmother split, I moved in with my aunt and uncle, and they were LDS. And, you know, we went on Easter in our jeans and a button-up shirt because, you know, my aunt would run around the house screaming at us, you better get in the car. So we'd go, you know, not willingly. And so, no, I mean, it's prominent around here. It's everywhere. So I spent a lot of my life around bonfires, drinking beers, talking about how stupid it was, and you know, all that. And fast forward to 3 days ago, I just got baptized. So
what?
Yeah.
Did you really?
I did. 38, and I finally decided it was time. So,
dude,
yeah,
I was 37.
Yeah,
got baptized. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. So a lot's happening.
We'll save that to the end because that's the good stuff.
Yeah.
How many siblings did you have?
So I don't have any full siblings. I have an older half sister and a younger half brother.
With your dad's second wife?
No, we all have the same mom.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So I'm my dad's only child.
Okay.
So yeah, and I saw them, you know, more so growing up, probably 10 to 15. My sister, she's 5 years older than me. So by the time, you know, I got around to traveling, because my mom lives in Boise. She moved to Boise after she left my father and me. And so my sister was up there, and then I'd go stay with them for the summer. They lived in Idaho City after a while, which is a little mountain town, which is awesome. I loved it there. Peace, you know, outdoors. We were in the mountains, and my little brother was there. And I went to school in 5th grade up there for, I think, close to a full year. And it's a culture shock. You know, it's completely different. There's not a Walmart or a gas station right there. You know, you got to travel to get your stuff.
Yeah.
my mom worked in Boise, and it was 45-minute drive both ways in the snow, and she had a 2-wheel drive car. She's always drove hot rods, so she had like a 70 Nova and a 67 Chevelle. And my half brother's dad was a Volkswagen mechanic, so he had a Volkswagen bus and a Baja Bug. And you know, it was fun though. We worked on cars, played outside. It was great. I loved it.
Yeah.
But you know, there was always that looming fear in the back of my head that I had to go home to not a very friendly home life.
Yeah.
And so, but back to where college, and I made it 1 year. I was going to CSI to be a mechanic. Well, they want you to get your associate's degree. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I just want to be a mechanic. So I quit after 1 year and moved to American Falls to farm with another cousin. And I think we made it 2 days and I quit because I was unhooking a hand line and the riser blew up and the hand line hit me right between the legs. And we didn't come back after lunch. That was enough of that.
Sounds like a potato farm.
Yeah, it's a big farm there in the area.
Okay.
And so we went about another 30 minutes east to Blackfoot, a little town called Pingree, and got jobs there. And I was the linear guy, which a linear is like a pivot, but instead of going in a circle, it goes in a straight line. So I would just pick the risers up with the tractor and move them to the next riser and drop them. And I did that for a whole summer, and that was not a fun job. I was on call 24 hours. The whole time, you know, it was work, party, do this, drink, smoke, women, all that. And did that for a while, and then moved back to Twin with my dad. And
so you're like 19 now?
Yeah, 19, 20, right in there. And went back to the same thing, you know, just partying with friends. And then I can remember vividly laying on the floor after partying and my dad calling me first thing in the morning and he said, "Hey, you need a job," and we have one. So I went to work for the dealership as the lot tech, which is pretty much just the guy that does all the things nobody else wants to do. But it was a great job. I liked it. Freedom. I got to drive cool cars. And one thing I've kind of left out of all this is my ego is so big when I was younger, especially once I kind of took advantage of my dad and I would take cars off the lot, nice cars, and drive them like they were mine. And I thought I was so cool. And my ego, if I could go back and kick my own ass, I would, because the person that I was, man, I do not like that person. I look back at pictures, and the things I was doing are very regretful. So I didn't like that person. And I think that was another reason I was, you know, numbing so much, was the regrets I had for the person and the way I treated people. You know, I run into people that I haven't seen back then, and I try to be better, but I know that I wronged a lot of people. My wife being one of them. We met in high school, and we actually met in driver's ed. She's a year younger than me.
Yeah.
And she couldn't stand me for that very reason, because of my ego. And I still struggle with it today. You know, it's something that I have to keep in the back of my mind, you know, and I see my son kind of getting the same way, and I'm like, oh, buddy, you know, he's 6, but he's definitely his father's son. So at least I've gone down the road and I can kind of help him see, like, hey, you know, you can't talk or treat people this way because it'll come back and get you.
Right.
So,
Right.
So yeah, about 20, I did that for about a year. And then I got another farming job and was kind of running everything because I was the only one that really knew what was going on. But all I was doing was working so that I could buy enough weed so I could stay high while I was working. I was going nowhere, accomplishing nothing, didn't care. We were up in the mountains in this awesome area. We got free cabins to stay in, service, pickup. Like, I had it made. So I thought.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'd come to town and party every weekend. And that ran its course. and I moved back to Declo with my aunt that I had lived with in high school, got another farming job, and did that for about a year. And it was a great place to work. The guy that owns the farm taught me a lot. I learned a lot from him. People warned me, he's an angry guy. He was angry in all the right ways. If you messed up, he would tell you. And I still use a lot of the things and values he taught me to this day. And but I had turned 21 while I worked there. I didn't want to work on a farm, and there was an opening with some of my buddies. They had a 3-bedroom duplex in Boise, and one of the roommates moved out, and they said, "Hey, it's yours if you want it." And I was gone. And we lived 2 blocks from Boise State, and the parties were legendary. We had a lot of fun there. And, same thing, smoking, drinking, not a whole lot of pill usage that I can recall. And then during the summer, they would go to Alaska and work on fishing boats. And I didn't sign up in time to go and didn't really want to. So I moved back to Twin, went to work for my dad again. Did that for a while, and then decided, well, actually, we got this huge house. It was an 8-bedroom house, and again, party house. We partied. I mean, I still run into people that remember those. And same thing, drinking, smoking, all kinds of partying. And did that. I think we were there for about a year. And then we moved into a littler place with just 4 of us. And we tried to keep it going, and it just didn't have the same effect. So at this point, my weed addiction is pretty bad. Like, I'm waking up in the middle of the night to smoke because I'm going through withdrawals.
So did you ever think along that, maybe I have a little bit of a problem, or did it just feel normal to you, or what?
I knew it was a problem. So, for example, I was taking fake pee in for drug tests, and because at this point, this was in 2008, 2009, when it was impossible to get a job. We were trying, I was trying. So finally, I got my CDL and got a job driving, and I had got a chemical burn on my arm at work, and I'd had it for, I don't know, 4 or 5 days. And our regular boss had gone to do something. So our fill in was like, "Hey, you need to go to the hospital and get that checked out." And at that point, it was starting to heal. I was like, "Okay, fine." So I go in to get checked, and they're like, "Hey, we'll take you back for a UA and stuff." And I'm like, that can't happen. So I tried to get out of it, and I just left. Well, I get back to work, and our regular boss came back, and he knew they had called him, and he said, "Well, now the owner knows." And I'm like, "Well, I'll face the consequences." Essentially, I didn't want a dirty UA on my CDL record.
Right.
And so I just left. Well, nothing ever came of it. I never got UA'd again. So I kept doing what I was doing. There was no consequence for my action. Why would I stop? And I did that for a while, and I loved that job. That was a really good job. And the house we were renting, when we would send the payment for our rent, the guy was just pocketing it. He wasn't paying the mortgage.
Oh, wow.
So the bank contacted us, and they're like, "Hey, you guys need to be out of there." So we worked out a deal with the bank that we would just pay them directly and skirt him. Well, I don't know how we pulled that off, but we did. So then he started I think it was his uncle was the realtor, and they duct taped a handwritten letter to our door that said, "Either pay us all the back rent or get out by the end of the week." And this is like on a Monday. And we said, "Okay, we'll leave." So all 4 of us moved out, and I moved to Boise and moved in with my mom and did the same thing. And this is when pills. So my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, and they found it really early, and they did the surgeries and stuff. Well, she couldn't really handle the pills, and they were giving her anything she wanted. Mm-hmm. And I took advantage of that, and I started selling enough. So she would make me pay her for them. So I would sell enough to pay for what I wanted. And then it got to the point where I knew I could get them, from her. So I just started stealing them from her. And if she ever sees this, I'm sorry, Mom. But that turned into, me taking advantage of her. And then, like I had said, I had an older sister that, dealt with a lot of issues. And I can remember she had a garbage bag full of pills that she had left at my mom's. And I went through there and found, a lot of things that weren't my style, but I found a bottle of tramadol, and I'd never tried tramadol. And I remember the first time I took them, it was like Ritalin and Vicodin mixed in one. I felt so good, and I was so energetic that it was like starting a whole new addiction over again. And, so I rode that way for a little bit. Meanwhile, my father's living in Twin still. And right about all this going on, I get a house with another cousin of mine. And this is when Spice started getting popular.
You got a lot of relatives too, by the way.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, you could say that. So we were, dabbling in Spice, and I just listened to another brother's podcast, and he described Spice and how it affected him. And I was like, I know exactly what you're saying, dude. And it started giving me severe panic attacks. And we'd only smoke it, when we couldn't find weed. And I remember smoking it. We smoked a lot of it, bags of it. And it got to the point I had a really bad panic attack, and I said, I'll never touch it again. And I was in Twin visiting my dad, and some buddies were passing it around. I was like, what can it hurt? And I had such a severe panic attack that I went upstairs, and my dad's like, what's going on with you? And I told him, just hold my hand so I don't lose the ability to be on this planet. And I just sat there and hyperventilated for a good 30 minutes. And it was not a fun experience. And the effects lasted probably still to this day. The next time I tried to smoke weed, the same thing happened. I had a panic attack. And I was like, oh no, I can't smoke weed anymore. Now what? And at this point, we're just getting, 5 or 10 pills here and there. And so that kind of put an end. Well, it didn't it completely put an end to me smoking. I don't even want to try. So I guess that's kind of a good thing, blessing in disguise, so to speak. I really didn't want to go through that anymore. So I quit doing that. And at this point, my drinking's minimum, maybe on the weekends once in a while. And then I met my wife. Well, I didn't meet my wife. I had kind of moved on. So I chased my wife for about 7 years, from the time we were 16 till about 23. And I finally decided, if you love something, let it go. So I moved on, and it wasn't very many months later, I got a message on Facebook from her. And I was living in Boise. She lived in Utah. And we reconnected, got engaged. And at this point, I'm doing good. Drinking here and there, but nothing crazy, just with friends, or when she'd come up, we'd go party. We get married, and I get offered a job with her family, and I take it. So we move back to Burley, and we're playing church ball and run into some old acquaintances and start the whole pill process. But at this point, I'm buying 100, 120 at a time, and keeping it from her. She has no idea. And before I had moved back, when we couldn't get pills, we started using kratom. And I remember the first time I took it, I was like, this is dumb. This doesn't do anything for me. So I didn't really do it. And when I moved back here, that's when it really took off. And so if I couldn't get pills, I'd just get kratom. So depending on, whether or not my supplier was in jail or on the run or wouldn't answer their phone, dictated how much kratom I was using. And I was taking a lot, like 120 milligrams a day, like just mouthfuls every couple hours.
Yeah.
And, I got to the point where I chose it over pills. I liked it that much. It was easy to get, didn't show up on any tests, and I liked the way it made me feel. Yet when people would ask me, should I try it, I would say, don't ever touch it. It will consume you. It's terrible. It's expensive. It's not good. I wish, that's one thing I wish, well, of many things, but if I could go back, I just never would have, because it really springboarded my addiction to a whole new level. So that went on. I mean, I was taking it every day for at least 6 years whenever I couldn't get pills. And then I just kind of gave up on the pills and was just taking it. And then, let's see, this kind of gets me to what led me up getting to the ranch.
Yeah.
And so it was about almost exactly 3 years ago. I still dabbled, but then it got to the point where I could get a lot again for an affordable amount of money. But that process kind of started as, hey, I just want 20, and that would get me through a week, and then it was 30, and then 40, and then it really took off about 3 months after that. I was spending $3,000 to $4,000 to $5,000 a week on pills.
Wow.
Yeah, it was bad. And about this time, so in 2018, my dad had been diagnosed with colon cancer, and they went in, took the tumor out, and they told him we got it, but usually we do some chemo to try to make sure we get all the cells. And he was anti-chemo, wouldn't do it. So he didn't. Well, it came back in, it'd be the fall of 21, which is right about when I started really getting into my addiction. And so he got sick, and he was so malnourished, he couldn't eat. So he was getting, his prescriptions, and I knew when his refill date was, so I would go see him, get some from him, spend the day with him using, come home, and usually whatever he gave me, I had gone that day or within 24 hours, and then I was back, fine. And in, I would say, March or April, it all came out, and I got caught because I was draining bank accounts. Obviously, it's a very expensive habit.
Yeah.
It doesn't take long for people to catch on. And I was so ashamed. I ran up to there and stayed with him and told him everything. And at this point, my marriage is on the line. I have 3 kids, and I was.
Did your wife use anything at all, or?
Nope, she is not. She doesn't know. So, like I said, at this point, rightfully so, I was looking at losing everything. I was at the biggest steps I could be. And so I came home, faced the music, and was okay for, about a month or so. And then
So you didn't use anything?
I was still using Kratom. And, like I said, my dad was getting right, and I kept that in the back of my mind. But also I saw, he needed them. I'm not completely heartless. I have compassion, but also I have an addiction. So if he offered them, I would take them.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a period there where, I wasn't taking anything. It was, I would say, about a month. And then it all happened over again. I got offered some and was like, sure. And went back down that path. And then, like I said, he couldn't eat. He was very malnourished, and they started him on chemo. And he got his first treatment, and it fried the back of his throat so bad he couldn't swallow, could barely talk. And I think it was within a week, he was in the hospital. He was in his room and fainted, and my uncle heard it from downstairs, went up, got him, called the ambulance. They took him to the hospital, and this was on a Wednesday. And I went up and saw him. And I remember being in the room with him, and I got him a whiteboard, and I was like, wrote some typical responses for him and talked to him. We kind of knew it was the end. It was stage 3, but we thought, the chemo would extend it and he'd live, however long that lasted.
Mm-hmm.
And that weekend, I said, I'll be back this weekend. And all of us were going to come, my wife and kids. And we were getting ready to leave. And I told my wife, like, just let me go. I'll go up and check it out. And he's still in the hospital at this point. I said, and then if everything's cool, you guys come up tomorrow. And I get there, I think it was about 8 o'clock. And my aunt met me in the driveway and she says, we need to go to the hospital now. And I said, okay. So we get there and they had him stabilized. They had intubated him at that point without telling us, asking us anything. Mm-hmm. And so I leave to go use, and I get a call at 5 a.m. You need to be here now. And I can remember getting in my pickup and just screaming and saying, not this way. This isn't how he's supposed to go. This isn't fair. And it's about a maybe 10-minute tops drive to the hospital, depending on traffic from where I was. And I used as much as I could get. At this point, I'm snorting pills. So as many as I could, parked, did as many as I could before I went in there. And I get in there, and it's, they've got so many machines hooked up to him. The room was full of them. And they're like, he's comfortable, but, the countdown has started. So I call my wife and I'm like, hey, you need to get up here. I call family, and it was about 8:25. And I can remember I was sitting, facing him at about 5 feet from the foot of his bed in a chair, and everyone's around me. And a nurse comes in and says, checks his pulse and says he's gone. And I felt nothing, absolutely nothing. I was so numb that I didn't feel the loss of my father.
Yeah.
And it took a while for it to sink in. It was still that morning, and once I heard that, it was a blur. All I remember is leaving the room, going back to my pickup, using, and then walking around the parking lot. It was like the sun was still, just coming up. And I felt a sense of not peace, but almost like he doesn't have to suffer anymore, and I don't have to watch him slowly wither away, which I didn't realize until later on when someone much smarter than me said, would you have rather watched him, lose his dignity, slowly wither away, or this? And I said, well, I would have liked to have had more time with him, but also, I think this was.
There's some mercy in that, sometimes, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's been hard for me to deal with, because I didn't hug him the last time. We had so many machines to him, and they said, they didn't want him to get septic, all this. And looking back, it's like he was already going. What was one hug gonna do?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of regrets surrounding that situation, but I've made peace with that.
Good.
So from there, I spiraled. I was going to meetings, talking clean, living dirty. And
why were you going to meetings?
Well, so I was trying to find, mostly I was going to meetings because other people told me to.
Okay.
And I had a desire, I didn't want to live that way. I didn't like it. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be a better person, father, husband, but at the same time, I had that mentality. I can just keep doing what I'm doing and make it look like I'm doing the right thing.
Right.
I think a lot of us have that thought. I know. And so at this point, I'm back to spending thousands a week on pills. And this is when it gets so back up to about 2013, 2014. We were at some of my wife's family's house, and I went into the bathroom and found a very large bottle of pills. I was like, oh, well, these must be for me. So I helped myself to some. And that started a process of me frequently returning to this house to help myself to some. And little did I know, I thought I was getting away with it. I was not. They were aware. And this all came to a head about 2 months after my father died. Okay. I was in the throes of my addiction and decided I had just dropped off some money to the person that was essentially the middleman, and was headed to work and decided to stop by a house that I knew of the person that lived there from high school. We weren't friends or anything. I just knew their name. And stopped, went to the door, and on the way to the door, I stepped in dog shit. So I stopped, I turned around, and I'm literally getting back in my pickup, and my addiction goes, "Where are you going? You didn't go to this house." I was like, okay. So I go in this house, don't find anything, leave.
You break in?
It was unlocked, so I just walked in. But dogs, they got hound dogs, and they're just howling at me, and I'm like, here's all your signs. You were almost back, and you're looking back. It's like you were in your pickup, leave. And so I go through the house, don't find anything, and I go to work. And about 2, maybe 3 hours later, I get a text from a buddy, and it's a screenshot of this Facebook post with my picture of on camera. And he's like, "Hey, I just thought you should know about this." And I remember the just whoosh, like my life was over feeling. And I panicked. And
you in their house?
What's that?
It was you in their house or on the door?
Yeah. It was in the house. It was a camera inside the house. And it's all over social media. And I get some calls, people asking questions, and I make up this story that I thought was bulletproof, and, keep denying, I was there for a legitimate reason. When you're in your addiction, you think, oh, my stories are great, everyone's going to listen to them. Looking back, I'm like, who in the world would have believed that?
Yeah.
So at this point, 2 or 3 days after my father had died, I had been in the process of becoming a reserve police officer here in town. And 2 days after my dad died, I had got sworn in as a cop. And so I get a call from people I know in the department, and they're like, "Hey, you need to come in and talk to us." I'm like, okay, I got my bulletproof story. I'm going to get away with this. Well, I go in there and tell them this story, and they saw right through it, didn't believe a word of it. And, they asked, "Are you going to stay on?" And one of them said, "No, absolutely not. You just lied to us." And that was the moment that was the eye-opening moment to me, that my lies that I was telling from my addiction were why I was in the place that I was in. Mm-hmm. And, just 1% more honesty out of me might have changed a lot of things. But I was so deep in them, I couldn't remember which lie.
Right.
Everybody, well, not everybody, but I've heard it a lot. We all tell that story. So my lies that got me there, I thought my lies would get me out, and all they did was worse. So they come to my house I have a badge and gear and all kinds of stuff at this point. So they come and take it, and, they're like, kind of give me the, you need to figure your shit out story. And I'm like, yeah, I realize that now. This was a brush with something that I don't want legal trouble. I have a life, a business, all kinds of stuff, everything to lose. And they're backing out of my driveway. And so after the whole Facebook thing had gone down, I don't have Facebook, but I made a fake account just so I could get on and look at that post. And they had posted the person that I knew was working out of town. So they posted the father's number and said, "If you have any information, call him." Well, I had called him, and I said, "Hey, I'm the one, blah, blah, blah," and made up, this story, gave him a fake number. And I actually gave him my number, but I just flipped 2 of the numbers. Well, the police department has my number because I'm a reserve cop. So as soon as the one cop put that number in, he's like, "Your name popped up. Like, how dumb are you?" And I'm like, "Well, technically not 100% done because I flipped the number thinking that would get away with it. It didn't. So they're literally backing out of my driveway, and I'm having that thought of, ooh, I got away with that. I better figure this out, you know. And it wasn't a figure this out, like get on the right path. It was figure out how to get away with this better. And they're halfway out my driveway and they stop and pull back in. And I'm like, well, this can't be good. The father had found out that I gave him a fake name and number and wanted to press charges. Again, my lies got me another, you know, demerit. And so I got charged with unlawful entry and got a lawyer, got a year probation, and, you know, went through that. Well, I actually didn't. So this was in June. Yeah, into June. And the whole going into relative house, taking pills thing came up. And my whole veil that I had put over all this blew up. And, you know, I was still lying, trying to get out of it to my wife. I made up this fake story, and I won't go into the details, but the lengths I went to try to make this look like I was supposed to be in that house and the cops were just wrong is mind blowing.
Yeah.
So this was only, I want to say 2 or 3 months after the ranch had opened here in town. And that's when, you know, I got the ultimatum, you have to get help. And, you know, in my mind the whole time, like, no, I can quit on my own. You know, I've done it numerous times. I don't need help. But once the ultimatum was given to me, you know, it's either that or you're gone. We're gone. This is done.
Right.
I said, okay. So initially I reached out to Moonlight, which is in Pocatello, which is about an hour from here. And they wanted all kinds of money for me to go there, and I'd have to drive up there, you know, multiple times a week for 2 hours. And I was just like, I don't know. So I put that on the back burner. Well, then my wife comes to me, you know, and says, hey, the ranch is right here. And I said, okay. So I reached out to Forrest and kind of told him my situation, you know, that I couldn't necessarily. So I didn't do in-house. I didn't do PHP. So I reached out to him and told him, you know, this time of year, so we farm, I do spraying and all the fertilizing. I can't be gone for 60 days. So he said, well, you need to talk to Drew. And Drew was still in Utah at this point. He was in the process of coming up here. I talked to Drew, and it's funny how, you know, when I thought of Forrest, I was thinking this big burly guy with a beard and stuff. And the first time I met him, I'm like, you are not even close to what I imagined. And, you know, same with Drew. You know, I talked to Drew and I'm thinking this guy's like surfer dude, you know, because he's got that persona about him. And they say, okay, well, come meet us, you know, at the Hayburn house, and we'll sit down with Justin. So it was an alumni night, a Wednesday night, the first time I went. And I get in the room with Justin and Drew is not what I expected. Love the guy to death. And it's funny to see who he was then compared to who he is when you're in group with him. You know,
yeah,
like this guy looks like he's fun, you know, he likes to have a good time. And then when you get down to business, you know,
he takes the disease very seriously.
Does. And I love that dude to death. He's done more for me than I can even realize.
Yeah.
But I can remember, you know, we kind of talk about it. And at this point, I think we're like July 21st, somewhere in there. And I had.
So are you court ordered?
Nope.
At this time?
Nope. This was all voluntary.
Okay. But your wife's like, hey, it'd be a really good idea.
Yeah. So with the legal thing, they didn't, and now they might, but they didn't know why I was in that house. I never told them. So, which it doesn't matter now. We're through it. But so I'm sitting in the room with them, and we're almost three weeks since that whole on camera thing had happened. And I remember Justin, you know, he goes, so how many days clean do you have? And it was like 24 or 25.
So you're an IOP?
Not yet. So this was kind of,
You're just going to like alumni groups?
So they invited me on the alumni night, but it was kind of an interview to see if it would work for me, if we could make it work. And Justin says, "How many days clean do you have?" And I said 24. And he leans over and he goes, "How many do you really have?" Like he knew. And I said, "No, really, 24." My wife goes, "Yeah, I've been UAing him." Well, she didn't know, I was using fake pee and I was not clean. And so we talked to them and they're like, "Okay, we don't really, we feel like you need PHP, but, at this point, IOPs, we'll make it work." And so I go to alumni and I sit in, this is when we only had like 15 guys in the whole area ranch. And we Zoom, this is when we used to Zoom in with Utah. And I sat in that room and one of the first people that greeted me was, it was nothing but love. And the whole time I'm like, man, I don't fit in here. I don't have anything in common with these guys. I'm so much worse than they could ever be. And we get through the Zoom meeting and we're out in the driveway, just fellowshipping. And one of the brothers comes up to me and he goes, "So what's your story?" And I'd never told, never shared, never talked about it. And it took about 2 seconds and he goes, "You're shy. I'll tell you mine." And he tells me his story. And I was like, "Oh, my story's not shit compared to yours." Like, you think, that terminal uniqueness, and I'm the only one that's been through it. And then you hear some stories and you're like, wow, I did a lot of bad things, but I didn't do as many bad things as I could have. And it kind of, that was the moment, I was like, maybe there is hope for me. But I didn't give myself to the steps, to the program, to the brotherhood. So this is the end of July. And I went into the program with the mentality, I'm going to go through this, do everything I'm supposed to, and then I'm going to go back to doing what I was doing. I'll check all the boxes, make everybody think I did what I was supposed to do.
Right.
So I do that so I don't want to say that's all kind of blurry in there because it was a complete life change. But I can remember, continuing my usage, finding ways to pass UAs, and then thought, well, I'll give it a chance. And I can remember, the first week I was in day group with a couple brothers, and I was sober. I think I had about 3 weeks at that point, and I was on the pink cloud. And we had a brother that had some issues, and I remember showing up for him and actually having a clear mind and being able to share with him and kind of help him through some stuff and being like, wow, this is awesome. This is what I want. And, I was white knuckling it. I was showing up and doing everything that I was supposed to, but I wasn't fully committed. And fast forward, so that's July. We're about middle of August then, and the beginning of September, I had told the people that I bought from, I'm done. I don't want any more of this. And then I found a way to get back into that. I went on a week-long relapse. I was not showing up for anything. I was staying with people out of town, and I can remember I would drive in, I would get enough money to buy what I needed for the day, come back to town, get what I needed, and go back. I was staying in Boise. And again, I thought I had everyone fooled and was not, fooling anybody. And I was leaving town and I passed my wife and she thought I was headed out to the ranch for a meeting. And she calls me and I'm just about to Kasota, which is the exit where the refuge is now, but the original ranch. And this is about the middle of my relapse. And I'm headed out to I zoom in on my iPad while I'm driving, and I'm headed out to the meeting, and I would take the iPad screen and scoot it to the side and snort pills on the way to the meeting. And so I showed up out there and I got called out. Where have you been? My story wasn't adding up. And one of the brothers that I was close with called me out. And I denied and lied and, hid. And at this point, so September 11th is my sober date. And this was the week before that. And so when that when I finally faced it and quit, well, then we got into harvest, and I couldn't come to the meetings, the group and everything at night. So I would zoom in while I was at work and just mute it and, have my headphones in. I was present, and I kept, I needed to come clean to the brotherhood. And this is when a couple of new guys started working for the ranch, and they would tell their stories. And, I justified, oh, I didn't want to take away from them, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, about, I'd say 2.5, 3 weeks later, we get done, and I show up out there, and I wait till after group, and I go into Drew's office and I tell him. And he goes, you have the gift of desperation. And I said, you have no idea, dude. I'm so tired of this. I'm so tired of the lies.
Yeah.
And the whole time I've been in the program, one of our very infamous brothers, Swim, would always preach the steps.
Mm-hmm.
And I never, I half-heartedly had started them. And at this point, I'd had a sponsor, and I just wasn't engaging, wasn't doing the things I was supposed to with him. And one of the guys that had started, I would start meeting with him after meetings and doing step work with him. And once I started doing the steps, that's when, things started clicking. And I did that, through that fall into the winter. And we came back. We had gone on vacation over Christmas. Was it Christmas? Yeah. And I came back, did my step 5 with a brother, and I rode that pink cloud for a week. It took us 17 hours to do my step 5.
Okay.
I had a lot. I left a lot. So we did it a little differently. We drove around in my pickup for 17 hours. And from there,
how did that feel when you were done?
Like I said, I rode that cloud for at least a week. It was life-changing. That was something that I still, just talking about it, I get that feeling again. And so we go forward, we graduate in March, and, I start doing trying to be present, but life moves fast, and, get through that first year, still with my struggles. I completed the steps before graduation, and
I lost you.
Oh,
there you are.
Okay. So complete the steps graduation.
So you did PHP and IOP. You never went into residential.
Correct. Okay. Yeah. Yep. So I was going out, for PHP, I'd drive out there, for the 1 o'clock class, and most days I'd just stay out there for night group. So it was a lot of driving. It's 40 minutes from where I live to the range.
Mm-hmm.
But, you can't, you have to put the effort in, and that's something that I learned the hard way. Like I said, I thought I would just skate through it and come out the other side and do what I was doing, and it doesn't work that way.
Right.
And, the brotherhood was huge, and there was a lot of struggle because the pendulum would shift to where it's, everything I was doing was the ranch, the brotherhood. Meanwhile, my family's still stuck in that shithole that I left them in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm out here trying to better myself and go through recovery, and they're still left with the mess that I made.
So did your wife go to any family group or Al-Anon or anything?
She did in the beginning. She did the Dixon's groups and the family stuff, and she put in good effort. And she was doing really well. And I not necessarily intentionally, but I see it now. I was almost going to group, learning, getting all the right phrases and everything to bring home to her, to feed her, to not necessarily help her through it in the healthiest way, just to try to get her past it. I didn't want to help her heal or help her get through those things. I just wanted her to get over it. I'm like, hey, I'm doing all these right things. I'm learning all these things. Meanwhile, at home, I'm still not the man that I want to be. I'm still acting not great. I wasn't showing up, because I had almost thrown myself. It was almost like the ranch became my new addiction. I replaced it with my old one.
Interesting.
And, yeah. And, it's not a bad thing, but also I had to find that healthy balance between the two. And I struggled with that because, when I first started it, someone, again, wiser than me said, you need that connection. You need that brotherhood, because I had tried to do it all alone, and I'd spent my life on teams and around groups of guys that, you could share stuff with, but nothing like this. Those brothers in those rooms know more about me than anybody else in my life.
Yeah.
And, same for me, I know things, same deal. So we move forward. Let's see, it'd be a year ago. So about a year after graduation, my timeline might not be perfect. My daughter, so in October, so September 11th, come clean. In October, my father-in-law passes from cancer as well. Mm-hmm. And, that he was the patriarch. That shook our whole family, and I got to show up for my family instead of run and hide like I used to. And that was new for me. That was really hard. I didn't know how to do that. I hadn't had to do that ever in my life. And so I did, the things that I could. I'm not an emotional support bear. I'm more of a, you got something that needs to be done, I'll do that for you. And so that's what I did. I took, tasks. And
that's kind of, they say your love language, right? You do for people.
Yeah. And so we got through that. And, looking back from where I am now, I don't know that I can almost say for certain I wouldn't be where I'm at if I hadn't lost my father and father-in-law within 5 months.
Yeah.
Because that entailed my mother-in-law attending church and my daughter going with her because, she didn't want her to be alone. We didn't want her to be alone. And my daughter started going with her every week. And when she turned 8, at this point, I'd found what I thought was my higher power, and I searched. I really did. I didn't just point to one thing and say, that's it. And I can remember I did my step 1 in IOP, and Drew asked me, he says, what do you think your higher power is, or what do you identify it as? And I said, music. And he looked at me and he goes, well, why wasn't it enough? And I didn't have an answer. And so that was kind of what kicked into, oh, maybe I don't, know what it is, or maybe I need to do some searching. So I did. I searched because I felt that it wasn't fair to just jump right to, the Christian God or whatever, one certain thing. I searched. I really did. And it frustrated some people. It's more obvious for some than others. And it took me a while to get there. But I had an open mind, and I can remember what kind of, besides that, what really opened my mind and everything, John Clayton. We would do our weekly calls with John, or our monthly, and he called me and we talked, and he always prays for you at the end of your call. And he said, Kegan, can I pray for you? And I said, yeah, sure, John, whatever. And something about having another human being pray for you the way that John, it changed me. I still get the feeling just talking about it. Yeah. Something inside me awoke. And I remember going to group the next time we had group, and I shared that thinking everybody would be like, oh yeah, no big deal. And everybody clapped and cheered, and I was like, oh, this is a big deal. That was very eye-opening to me. So from there, I started recognizing the signs that had always been there and going, oh, this isn't just coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence anymore. I said, there's something out there putting things in front of me and people in my life that are supposed to be there. And that was very awakening for me. And so
the cool thing is the people on the other side have to listen and show up for you.
Yeah. And so this last spring, my daughter turned 8, and she came to me and said, Dad, I want you to baptize me. And, that was huge. In my mind, I'm like, oh, I am a long ways away from that ability. I've got some work to do. But I told her, I said, I'll do anything for you. And, my wife was
She's your oldest.
Yes, she's 8.
She's going to church.
Yep, yep. And my wife was there, and I think it kind of blew her mind a little bit too, because she told my daughter, like, you don't understand what this means for your dad. And when she said that, I lost it.
Your wife is a member of the church.
Yes,
the LDS church. Gotcha.
yep.
Okay.
And she knew my beliefs and my background, and how I had spent my whole life not talking good about the church and the people in it. But we have, her grandparents are very involved in the church, and they are amazing people. And so every time the discussion would come up about, well, there's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of people that, look down on us because we aren't members. And then it would always come back to them and how good they are to us, to everyone around them. I mean, if you go to an event with them, you spend more time waiting for them to talk to everybody they know than actually attending the event. And it's great. Like, they're amazing people. So when it would always come back to them, and in the back of my mind and in my heart, that's the kind of people I want our family to be associated with, to be looked upon, as people that are good people.
Yeah.
And so that, when she asked me that started the journey. And so when, it's dominant in this area, and when we get missionaries, we'd meet with them once and then they kind of disappear. And looking back now, it's because the ones we have now, two of them just got transferred, but the 3 missionaries that I started this journey on were the 3 that were supposed to be there. Mm-hmm. They're 3 amazing gentlemen. They're awesome. Our family loves them. We welcome them. They're great. And I believe we were supposed to wait for them. Like I said, I don't believe in coincidence anymore.
Yeah.
I think they were supposed to be put here. I was supposed to be where I am now. Yeah. I don't think I was ready before, and everything just kind of fell into place. And so, it started, I would just kind of sit and listen to them give lessons to my kids, and, they would ask and I'd give, opinions. And a few weeks ago, they were leaving for a trip here in a couple of days, and we'll be gone for 2 weeks. And they, we can, baptize her when you get back. And, and then it's turned to me. And it was, well, you can do it too. And, I kind of said, this journey kind of started because she asked me to baptize her. Mm-hmm. But I believe it's, I've heard and I believe when we start recovery, it's okay to start for somebody else, as long as along the way you find out you have to do it for you. And that's where my spiritual journey started. I started this because I wanted to be able to baptize my daughter, but along the way I found out I have to do this for me. Yeah. There was a God-sized hole in my life. Once I found that missing piece and realized, I didn't even know it was missing until I found it. Something changed. And I'm not necessarily saying I've done this alone, because I've had the brotherhood and I've had a ton of people around me that I just didn't reach out to. And now I realize with a higher power, it's a lot better. I'm not going to say it's easier, but have something to help guide you. And I truly believe that this was a higher power's hand in everything that I believe I had to go through everything I went through to get me to here. Yeah. Something had to open my mind, my heart, everything to be able to be in this position. And so 2 weeks ago, they showed up it was just me and my youngest, she's 4. And they said, hey, if you want to get baptized in 10 days or whatever it was, when you return, then we can start the process of you baptizing your daughter. And I went, well, why didn't you guys just lead with that? We could have been this thing. So yeah, what's today? 2 days ago, the grandparents, I said we wanted to be like the grandpa. I call him my grandpa. I mean, they're pretty much my grandparents. He baptized me, and initially I was like, I don't want a ton of people there, just family. Yeah. And so I have pretty big extended family. I have one uncle that has 10 kids.
Wow.
So when I called him to tell him, he's like, "Can I spread the word?" And I was like, "You got 10 kids that are all grown with their own,
Yeah.
and other and their kids." I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And what I don't think I know that what got me here was saying yes. I just started saying yes.
Yeah.
Because in the
I
past, it
like
was,
that.
no,
I like
it's not my will. It's not me anymore making these decisions. So I just said yes and called another family member that has multiple siblings. Yes. And so it turned into quite a few people just that I had invited. And then we get our bishop, let's see, Bishop Corn's president came into Sunday school and announced it to everyone in our ward that I was getting baptized. And I
So have
went,
you been going to church with your family?
yep,
Okay.
yep, yep. So he's like, "Hey, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but Kegan's getting baptized today at 4." And I was just like, well, it went from a small bonfire to a wildfire real quick.
Yeah.
But again, at first I was like, oh, I don't know any of these people that well. It's going to be a little bit odd. And on the drive home from church, I was just like, you know what? Again, it's not my will. And why would I not want as much support as I could get?
Yeah.
And so we get there, and the font room holds maybe 30 people.
Yeah.
They had to move it into the chapel because there were so many. And I was like, holy cow. Like, again, God's will, man. There was so many people there, and it was awesome. And, I had, I have my questions, but being a convert, I met with other converts and I said, what about this, this, and this? And I was given a lot of wisdom of, you can spend your whole life asking all these questions and you'll never find all the answers.
Yeah.
Find the people and the good things and the good people that you want. And just like in recovery, if somebody has what you want, you latch onto them and you go with them. And that's what I've done.
Yeah.
Found the people in the church that have what I want, which is, that faith, the family, and that's the number one thing to me in my life now is my.
Yeah.
And so
Well, how long have you been sober now? Just Friday, September 11th.
Yeah, 22, yeah.
So you're over 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
I got baptized when I was 2.5 years sober. We got a really similar path.
Oh, cool.
I was 36.
Yep.
So AA brought me kind of back to, taught me spirituality. I grew up very Catholic and in northern Minnesota, and then I just sort of disappeared off of his radar. I mean, by choice, but anyway, AA brought me back to better understanding who God is, and I remember after I did my fifth step, and you talked about yours being a bunch of hours, and I remember in the big book, I love the big book. I consider it scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not like, I can't, those guys like go to page 81,
Yeah,
I'm not that guy. I've read it a lot, but there's right after step 5, it says, I was walking down the broad highway hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. And I remember that's the first time in my life that I actually pictured God and I together and holding hands, and it was really powerful. And so, I'm glad you found that, dude. I think, I think that's what recovery does. It opens us up to say yes to good things and to say no to crappy things, and it opens us up to God and where our path. If you're thirsty and hungry, like you end up where you're supposed to be. And for some people, that might be the LDS Church, it might be the Catholic Church, it might be the Buddhism, it might be Islam, but whatever it is. But we're open enough to God, and we're open enough to saying, though, that's not a coincidence.
Yeah.
What happened here, like giving credit where credit's due, right? Like that was a God shot, as they say in AA. That was a God moment. That was and I think being aware of those things for me is one of the many blessings of recovery, is being aware of, I mean, you can call them whatever you want. I think miracles happen every day.
Yeah.
And we just don't label them as that. We don't always call them that because we think they're supposed to be
Right.
turning water into wine or walking on water or what, it's not. There's little things that happen that change the course of our lives and
Yeah.
and the choices we make. And so, well,
100.
I'm super happy for you. That's when's your daughter's baptism?
We haven't scheduled it yet, but we will when we get back.
Nice.
But
Nice.
I wanted, speaking of the God moments, I haven't, outside of the rooms, I haven't shared my story because, there was a lot of shame and it affects my family,
Yeah.
kids, and my wife and everything involving that. And it was the night before I got the message from you, we were actually discussing that. And I said, is it time? Is it time to come out with my story? Because a lot of people in my life don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's one of those ask for guidance and it'll be given type of deal. The very next day, you text me and ask me to be on this. And I'm like, holy cow, the signs just don't stop. If you look for them, if you ask for them, because on this journey, I've asked a lot. I've said,
well, the funny thing about that affirms that is I was given your name and about 6 or 7 names from Drew.
Yeah.
Back in June or July.
Yeah, I remember Drew telling me it's been.
Oh, did he? Yeah, and I had so many other ones I was doing. I do like 3 a month, and so it's kind of like, and then I'm like, okay. So I went through over the last 2 years people I know, and then I'm like, hey Drew, I need Justin and Brian and Bluffdale, like, and so I sat on your name and about 5 other guys' names at least since July.
Yeah. I remember Drew telling me, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then, kind of forgot about it. Yeah, I got your message. I'm like, man, divine intervention, man, it's everywhere.
That's cool.
So, yeah.
Well, so what would you say to somebody out there right now that's struggling, that might want to be in early recovery, that might want to use that just needs some hope?
It's funny you asked that because I just got to share this with someone in that very similar situation. And it was, at the end of the day, it would be for you. And I struggled with that. I tried to put a lot of people in front of my recovery and it never worked. Once I set all that aside and realized, if I can't be the man of honor and the man I'm supposed to be, I can't be that for anybody else. Mm-hmm. And I tried for a long time to fake it so that I could be that person for somebody else. And it wasn't genuine. And I see that now. And I think, I think connection, is obviously the opposite of addiction. And I think that was a huge thing for me in brotherhood, was having someone that relates, because you can't go talk to a normie about this kind of stuff. They'll give you some sort of an opinion or an answer, but those of us that have been through it, it comes from a different place.
Yeah.
That's not to say there aren't experts that are good at what they do. I have a therapist who's an amazing guy and he hasn't been through it, but he's guided me through. So there's different lanes, but I think connecting with the people like we're spoiled. We're lucky to have the brotherhood. Mm-hmm. And that's what I try to stress to, when I do step 5s with guys. I just did one last week with a brother and I said, take advantage of this right now. Mm-hmm. Because not everybody gets this and it doesn't last forever. Eventually you have to go out and face the real world. Mm-hmm. Learn the lessons, pay attention, see, and, like I did, JoJo's that's my dude. I love that dude because him and I have spent more times in rooms than anybody else on this planet. I've spent more time with him because I saw he had something I wanted.
And I just did a podcast with JoJo a week ago.
Good. Yeah. I knew he was on your list. So
awesome guy.
Yes. Love that dude. So it's so much to offer. So find those people that have that glimmer, that light, that's something you want, and get with them, stay with them. And, don't, if you have the brotherhood, and I know, like I said, we're spoiled, don't lose that connection.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Life happens and we get busy, but, we can always come back to it. And like Drew says, plug into the brotherhood.
Yeah.
It's there. And, I go out to the ranch now and I know maybe one or two dudes, I know all the staff, but it's so cool to see, all new faces and get to go through things with them and help them. And, it's humbling when you get those step 5 calls.
Yeah.
So, man, I remember being where you were, and now I get to, that. And that's one thing, I look back at my path and realize I'm supposed to be here because I have to be here to help the next person through the fire.
Yeah.
And being of service is, one thing I got out of the ranch and I was like, yeah, I can't wait to be of service, and then just fell flat. I didn't get to, because I had to continue my life. And now, there's a calling in the church for the addiction councils. And I'm like,
Nice.
I feel like maybe that's something I could do.
An ARP missionary?
What's that?
An ARP missionary?
Addiction. So they meet on Friday nights.
The addiction recovery program. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And I know
I've been kind of in that since like a long time.
Yeah. And so I'm like, I know we don't get to pick, but is there like a way I could get to the front of the line in that and be a part of that? Because I feel, like I said, my path has led me here.
Oh, yeah.
I love helping, because it's like I say in step 5, is you're helping me just as much as I'm helping you, because I get to look back and go, man, I remember facing these situations and, looking for guidance and wisdom from those that had gone before. And now I can be, a little bit of that to some people.
Well, like they say, recovery is a gift, but it's the only gift you keep if you give it away.
Yep.
And we're promised in the 12th step that if we've worked the steps and we do them every day, as part of our life, we can have a spiritual awakening every day. And I'm a firm believer in angels. I'm sure there's, celestial angels all around me. I've never seen one, but all of my angels that I've recognized have been human beings.
Yes.
That he put in my life that responded to him saying, go give that dude in the corner a hug, go tell him he's in the right place, go do this. And I'm so excited for you and your daughter. My little girl's is up in Montana on a mission.
Yeah, I've heard you
I still remember the day I baptized her.
Yeah.
And so just like you tell all these guys, cherish that moment. I know you will. And you never know what'll happen from that, or the ripple effect that's happening in your life and other people's lives and your family and all the men you touch. So anyway, I'll be up there tomorrow doing group. You should stop by.
You go to the ranch?
Yeah, I do group up there once a month. So I'll be up there from 11 to 1.
Okay.
But I know you're busy. I'm just.
Yeah, we're trying to get packed. We're leaving to Cancun for 2 weeks. So.
Oh, bummer for you. What a rough Christmas.
Yeah.
Another blessing of recovery. You actually aren't spending thousands of dollars on dope. And now you can actually go have fun.
Yeah, worrying about getting it there and hiding it and all that.
Yeah, getting it through TSA. And I mean, it's a hassle.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, anyway, bud, it's been great to get to know you and to meet you. And thanks for sharing your story with whoever hears this. And I hope whoever's listening, felt what I felt when you were talking and has the hope that, if you want help, it's out there. And I think what you said is key, is you got to go out and find those people and hold on for dear life, because they were put there by your creator to help you, and hold on to them as you hold on to God.
Yep.
And thanks again for your time. I appreciate it. And hopefully I'll see you around sometime in person.
Yes. Thank you.
You bet. Take care, Kegan.
You too.